The state of no thought is a metaphor. We'd say, so Sid, what's a state of no thought? Because you're saying that's the most important thing that any human being can discover is that in the state of no thought, you have access to your well-being, you have access to wisdom, you have access to creativity, you have access to unconditional peace, joy, love. You have access to insights, access to inspiration, motivation, courage, compassion, clarity, perspective, common sense, solutions to problems. So Sid, what's this state of no thought? He says, well, it's very ordinary. And you're thought away from it at all times. And it's often the last place people look when they're feeling tense, stress, or upset. Innocently, most people, when they feel tense, stress, or upset, do more thinking about themselves or their situation. And it's impossible to think your way to well-being or to wisdom or to love. It's impossible. I'm living proof because I tried to prove him wrong. I'm going to say, I'm going to be the person that can think my way. I had my doctorate in psychology and I got a lot of praise for analytic thinking. But it didn't help me when it came to presence, accessing love, well-being, all the things I wanted in my life. So he said the state of no thought doesn't mean that you don't have thoughts in your head. I love the metaphor of the sky. The sky doesn't care if there's one beautiful songbird flying through or a whole flock of birds. The sky is untouched. Eckhart Tolle says, if you want to find well-being, the very first thing that has to happen is we have to disengage from our intellect so that thoughts and feelings can flow through this very moment freely. It's the only way. So we have to get more familiar with the state of no thought. I was working with a woman once who was having a psychotic episode and screaming and yelling and was just so upset, storming around my office and just flailing her arms. And I had no idea what to say to her. But in the state of no thought, you don't have to know. Another name for it is the unknown. Another name for it is presence. Why don't we have to know when we're present? Is because there's a deeper knowing available to us that can come to us. deeper knowing. It's not of the intellect. Some people call it intuition. Some people call it common sense. Sid called it a formless intelligence, wisdom. She's screaming and yelling. I get quiet, and something new and fresh is created. That's the benefit of the state of no thought. New and fresh can be created rather than what I had learned on how to respond to people who are screaming and yelling. It's not memory-based. Wisdom is not memory-based. It can utilize memory, but it's not memory-based. So it occurs to me, and I just say to her, you've been telling me that these principles are so hard for you. I want to tell you the secret. She stopped yelling and screaming. And I said, sit down. And she sat down. And I said, if you really listen, I'll tell you the secret. So let me know when you're really listening. You know another name for the state of no thought? Really listening. You can't think and listen at the same time. And she goes, oh, okay. Remember, everybody's a thought away from the state of listening, from being present. She goes, okay. And I said, that's the secret. I thought you said it was so hard. You just stopped screaming and yelling and you became present. You're a free thinker. You have free will. You don't have to keep thinking about something. And when we're present, we're not thinking about things, even though we can have thoughts going through our head, we're not paying attention to them. One time, Sid saw me sitting there by myself, thinking about something that was obviously making me very serious and stressed. And he comes in and I feel really embarrassed. It's like he caught me. And I look over at him and he doesn't say anything. He just sits next to me. And I can't take it. I go, oh, hi, Sid. And he goes, very sweetly, very gently, he goes, Dickon, don't you know when you feel this way, you can ignore everything you're thinking? And he stood up and walked away. It was one of the most beautiful lessons in the state of no thought. I never used to ignore thinking that created tension, stress, or upset. I'd really pay attention to it and believe it and hold it. Here's a metaphor. We're walking down the street, and there's people on both sides of the street, and they start yelling mean things to us. Do we have to stop and listen to each person and engage them in a discussion and disagree with them and argue with them? So we could just go, okay, let's just keep walking. When we're in our well-being, we're not paying attention to all the voices in our head that are distracting us, that are thoughts trying to create tension, stress, and upset. So they stay neutral when we ignore them. So one time Sid says, do you know every thought that comes into your head is neutral until you give your attention to it? And then you give meaning to it. I was working with a man who got sent to me by the hospital, and they said he's a severe, chronic, long-term alcoholic. We have detoxed him so many times, we're not going to do it anymore because he comes to us to detox so he can do more drinking, not to get better. And so we're insisting that he goes into therapy. Would you work with him? And I said, yeah, I'd be glad to. And he comes into his office, and I would say 90% of the thinking he was caught up in was very negative. It was all innocent. No one had ever told him that you're a free thinker and you have free will. And just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to give your attention to it and think about it or analyze it or continue to think about it. He started to catch on. And they had taken away his car years ago because he had been arrested for drunk driving so many times. So he came from another town, and he took a bus, and he comes into my office one day and he said, Dicken, I was on my way here and I was on the bus and I saw a friend that I used to go to the park with, and we'd drink wine together all day long. And he says to me, hey, good to see you. I'm just going to the park. You want to come? And right away, I shifted into that old pattern. And I started thinking, oh man, I have a check that came to my mother, but I know one store that I can go to, a big grocery store, and they'll cash checks. So I'll cash the check. I'll forge my mom's signature, cash the check, buy some wine, and go to the park to be with my friend. And then for the first time in his life, he realized that he had this strong feeling urge to drink. And it occurred to him a feeling is a thought. Always, no exception. So he said, if that's true, if I ignore this urge, this thought, this feeling, it should go away. Because that's what happens when you completely ignore any thought, it goes away. It stops creating. The urge went away. He came into the office and said, Dicken, this is the first time in my life I've had the urge to drink that I didn't. Because he saw a thought that had plagued him his whole life, and instead of giving attention to it, he just kept walking down the street. It's still yelling at him. And then eventually it went away. The state of no thought is the doorway to well-being, to wisdom. It's a natural doorway. It always has been. You get in a car to drive the car. You have to move toward the state of no thought at least a little bit, so you don't, if you're caught up in your thinking, you're going to have accidents. So you have to get somewhat present, state of listening, state of not knowing, which is quiet. But it's a nice feeling. The state of no thought is always a nice feeling. It's subtle, but it's a nice feeling. Sid liked to use the word contentment because you're not in judgments and shoulds and have tos. You're not in limited concepts and labels. It's just present. So you're driving the car, your hand is moving, you're going really fast past other cars going fast. You're making life and death decisions with your hand, but you're not doing it with your intellect. You're not going, should I go half an inch? Should I go a whole inch? Should I come back now? It's just happening. That's wisdom. I do a lot of hiking on trails that are with a lot of roots, tree roots. And it's so funny, you can just sort of vaguely look ahead and your feet keep making adjustments so you don't trip every step. That's wisdom. If you're in a crisis situation and you get present, you'll suddenly know when to stand still, when to say something, when to not say something, when to move. That's wisdom. So the state of no thought and wisdom go hand in hand. The state of no thought and wisdom and love are inseparable. That's pure thought, pure consciousness, pure mind. They're inseparable. They're the same thing. You find one, you'll find the other. So sometimes it would say, love. If you fall out of your thinking, you'll feel more connected to life. Why is that? Because in truth, we are connected to life already. That's why some people talk about the ocean of consciousness. A wave doesn't have to go anywhere to be connected to every other wave. We're all part of that same ocean. Spiritual teachers talk about the ocean of consciousness, and there is no separation. We're all connected. And the experience of that is love. So you can be on a walk in the woods and fall out of your thinking into the state of no thought, which is also your heart, and you'll fall in love with the trees. You'll fall in love with birds and flowers. If you're in a room of people and you fall out of your head into the state of no thought and you're resting in the state of no thought, which the Tibetan Buddhists say is the highest form of meditation, Sid would call it our natural meditative state, resting in presence, resting in the state of no thought. Thoughts and feelings are free to come and go and flow through us no matter what they are. Sad, happy, joyous, it doesn't matter. You're not caught up in them. That's suffering. You're not believing them, they're just flowing through. So you could have the thought, I'm stupid, and it's just a thought. It's not truth. It's just flowing through, and you don't pay attention to it. It's like a voice on the street calling you stupid. Beautiful state of no thought. Some people call that the freedom space because everything is free to come and go. Sid would say you're experiencing life as it is. As it is, whatever thought or feeling. You could be in a really low mood, and it's only a problem when we're caught up in our thinking, think it's true, and then act from that place. You can be in a really low mood, and it brings you back to the now. And you're in a low mood, all these thoughts are flowing through. But because you're in the state of no thought, you have access to love and wisdom, so you can still be kind even though you're in a low mood. You can still have common sense even though you're in a low mood. That's a higher level of consciousness. Yeah. If you ask my kids, they're grown now. They have kids. But if you ask my kids when they were growing up, when I had was learning these principles, they'd say, "Was your dad loving?" And they'd say, "Oh, yeah." When was he loving? I guarantee you, they would say he was loving when he was in a good mood and he just was expressing that warmth and kindness. And he was loving in a low mood because he kept his mouth shut. Innocently, I used to do the opposite. I'd get into a low mood with my kids, and I called that parenting. And I'd criticize and judge and don't do this, and I'd get impatient, and I'd bring my upset and I'd dump it on them. I learned the principles, and I realized, why would I be dumping my worst thoughts on my kids? And it occurred to me, when I have a cold, I don't run up to my kids and sneeze on them. Why would I sneeze my psychological viruses on them? And I became more particular about what feeling I brought to them when I wanted to have a parenting talk. They were completely different. Guess which parent they preferred? That they liked more. One time my daughter came up to me and she could see I was in a low mood. And she said, "Dad, I got to talk to you about something really important. I want your help with this. Go do what you do. Go take a chill pill. Go whatever you do, and come back when you're not caught up." Now she's that way with her kids. Another word for understanding that if you ignore thought that creates tension, stress, or upset, they call that being resilient. In other words, you get over upset quickly because you don't feed it with more and more thinking. Upset is like a little fire, and continuing to think about your upset is like throwing more logs on the fire. It doesn't make it go out, it extends it. I've used the metaphor of the snow globe a lot. You're upset and you're thinking, and then you start thinking more and more and more. You're shaking the jar even harder. It's just creating all of this storm. The only cure, you put it down. That's what Sid called the state of no thought. Pure thought. Not paying attention to the content of thought, but pure thought, presence. And all that upset thinking, insecure thinking, worried thinking, depressed thinking, angry, hurt thinking settles out. So Sid would say you're looking for a quiet mind. You can't think your way to a quiet mind because thinking shakes the jar. In a quiet mind, you'll find peace. You'll come back to clarity. My friend Jamie Smart based his whole teaching on clarity. You come out of thinking into a state of clarity, and when people are clear, they do anything better. Anything better. You communicate better. We solve problems better. We collaborate better from that place. So that was the phrase that I've heard it tons. And yet this morning, Natasha knew I would do this, but last night I had a different talk in mind to give you. I was going to talk about embodied spirituality because I've been inspired, had some new thinking about that. But this phrase kept coming back to me this morning, the state of no thought. That's the most important thing a person can discover, is that in the state of no thought, we're wide open to the intelligence of the universe. And the intelligence brings us what we need in that moment if we're open and receptive. And as Sid would say to us over and over again, don't take my word for this. Not a single word I've said is truth. I'm just trying to point you toward this, and then you find out for yourself if this is true. You find out if your feeling of tension or stress or upset isn't an invitation to the state of no thought. And if you understand that, you'll see the real benefit and value and wisdom behind tension, stress, and upset. It's not a curse, it's an invitation. And Natasha, in my language, is you feel these things, and the invitation is, Dickon, Natasha, come home. You've gotten lost in the content of your thinking. Come home. How do I get home? When you hit the state of no thought, which is one thought away, there's a built-in GPS that will bring you right back home again. Just like when you're driving and you make a wrong turn, your GPS goes course correction, and it brings you right back toward home. Okay, that's plenty. I'd love to open it up and talk to any of you about this.